Hi everyone, Jordan Ray here again with another Google Apps scripting video, this time suggested by a YouTube subscriber and Twitter colleague, Paul Carpenter. Um, and he wanted a way to create rosters uh, with Google Apps Script, and I thought it was a good time to talk about object-oriented programming also. I've been trying to make sure that my code is more efficient lately, and this is a great way to practice that. So I'm going to open up the script editor. I got a blank sheet here. This is where we're going to create our rosters. I'm going to open up the script editor, and once I do that, I actually need to activate some advanced services. So stick with me, and let me make this happen. Okay, now that it's enabled, close all of this out, and you're back to your code editor, and you can actually access, with the autocomplete now. We can use Classroom in our project. Perfect, it's exactly what we want. I'm actually going to erase all this, write my own function. I'll just call it create classroom rosters. Now, I'm not going to code the whole thing out just yet. I'm going to put some plans in here. But the first thing we need is obviously we need our courses from Classroom. So let's get that, classroom.courses.list. There's some options you can put in there, and actually, if you go to Classroom, I'm just going to Google search Classroom API, and on the website you can look through all of the methods that are available to you. I'm pretty sure all of these are also available in AppScript, using this Classroom service. But with a little bit of trial and error, you can find out for yourself. So courses, we're going to list them, and then we want to kind of save that into this courses variable. Perfect. So once we do that, we're going to actually loop through the courses and create them. So let me type that out, or let's write that out. I equals 0, simple loop, as long as it is less than courses.length, and then I'm going to increment that. So from every single one of these courses, right, we're going to have this courses, and then we've got some properties that we can use here. We need a name. Looking back at the requirements from Paul, we want the name, and then we want actually the students who are in the course, and we're going to get their names and email addresses. So we're going to get students. We're going to actually go classroom.courses. I think we want to list. No, we don't. What do we want? Student. Yeah, we want students, and then we want to list those students, and we got to give it an ID, which we can get from the courses incrementer.id, and then we're going to save this to students. Now, we're going to actually create the course, not to be confused with courses that I have up here. This is plural, here's our singular, and we're going to write new course, and we're going to give it the name and the students, and we're going to say course.create roster. Now, where is this stuff coming from? New course and create roster? Well, we're going to build that in a second with some object-oriented programming. And I'll try to describe exactly what we're doing there. Now, one other thing I'm going to show you how to do before we get too far into this is I'm going to use the OR operator here. I believe it's called the OR operator. You're going to have to look up the JavaScript operators, but we're going to put an empty array on the other side of this OR operator. So if you don't get any students back, we want to at least have an empty array, because that's going to kind of tell us some stuff later. So we can solve some problems for ourselves later by just telling it, hey, okay, we got an empty array here, instead of some sort of undefined variable, which is what I believe it returns. If you don't, and my internet is so slow, it hasn't even loaded up the documentation yet. Okay, so there we go. We have some these two things are not working yet. I'm just going to comment them out because we actually need to create this course class. Now in Google Apps Script, we don't have access to all of the cool new JavaScript techniques for creating a class, but we can still do it. And we're going to do it by, I'm capitalizing course here. That's just kind of an old JavaScript shorthand for creating a class. And just like any other function, there we go, we got a very basic thing. We passed in two variables to it, name and students. And we're going to talk about this character here, this keyword, I think it is, this keyword. That's going to refer to the class itself, the course. So this is a loop, right? And we're creating a new course with every loop, right? For every course that we have, creating a new course. This .name is going to set the name to this specific course. That seems very confusing, I am sure. But don't worry too much about it just yet. So I've got two properties, name and students. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a kind of a constructor function inside of the course to handle the students, because the way this student's variable looks right now is not the way, whoa, I just dragged around letters, is not the way that we're going to want it to look when we create the roster. So I've got instead of assigning the student's variable just to another property, I'm going to actually create a function, and I'll call it setStudents, and we're going to pass it students. Now, JavaScript uses prototypical inheritance, so we can actually write on the prototype for course, we're going to build that setStudents function, and we're going to give it that students variable. And we can still use the this keyword in here, and that this, again, is referring to this instance of the course. So this.students, this is where we're going to create that students variable, and we're going to use a mapping array method, and we're going to pass each student into that array, and this is where we're going to use some of the properties that are on the students returned from the whole list itself. So when we create a sheet, should be familiar with that by now, we're going to give it, each row is going to be an array, and in the first column of each row we want the student's name. So we can say student dot profile dot name dot full name. And this, you can find tons more properties when you look at that Classroom API documentation. Now the second column is going to be an email address, and we can do that with student.profile. Nope, sorry, it's not profile, it's student. Yeah, it is profile. .email address. And there we got two columns. We got the student's full name and email address. Again, tons more properties you can access off of each student if you take a look at that documentation. So this is how we're going to set the students to our course. When we create that course, we also, you'll see I'm running this create roster method. This also does not exist. We got to bring that into reality here. Course.prototype, we're going to do it the exact same way. Create roster, and that's going to be a function. It's going to take no parameters because all the parameters we need have already been created up here. We've got this.name and this.students that were created when we created the course. We can also just run this create roster kind of in sync here, but I kind of like to make things as explicit as possible. so it's clear for somebody else reading this code later. You'll see I haven't put any documentation in here, which can be very frustrating for other coders looking at your code. And feel free, I'm going to push all this to GitHub, so feel free to pull it into your own repository, add some comments, and then make a pull request back into my repo if you have the time to do that. So I'm going to create a spreadsheet variable, and that's just going to access the spreadsheet app.getActiveSpreadsheet. Then we need to get a sheet. I'm going to bring in this OR operator again. We're going to get sheet by name if it already exists. We're going to put this.name. If that already exists, that's going to become our sheet variable. Or if it doesn't, we're going to fall back to insert sheet, and we want to give it this.name. So basically this variable here is going to become either an existing sheet with this name, or we're going to create that sheet. And then if we have students, we want to add them to the roster. So if there is a length to the students array, we're going to run inside this block here. Now, again, if there's an empty array here, we're not going to bother with this at all. It's just going to be a blank sheet. So now I'm going to grab a range, and let's call it get range, and we need all of these. So we're going to start at row 1. We're going to start at column 1. The number of rows is going to be the students, it's this.students, length, and the number of columns is going to be 2, right? A name column and an email column. Perfect, so we got a range now. And then we want to clear the sheet, right? If there's already data on there, let's clear it out. And then let's range dot set values, and we can just add in this.students because it's already formatted with every row as an array, with text in each column. So that simply is going to be good enough to create a couple of things for us. Now we could even add, I'll uncomment these now that they exist. I haven't done any testing, but I did kind of code this out just to play around with the API a minute ago. So everything should work here. We could add this to the add-on menu, but as it is, we're just going to run it from so we want to create classroom rosters, and let's go ahead and run. Preparing for execution, got to give it some permissions because we're accessing our classroom and we're accessing our sheet to add in new sheets. Now I'm actually not sure if I have any classrooms on this account. That could be frustrating. Let's see here. Oh, I did. Okay, there's just not any students in it. Google Apps Script Masters, and there are no students. So, okay, so I didn't create any users in this on this roster, but now I've gone through, I created a little example account. Let's run this again, and now we should see the one student that I added to my little demo classroom here. And there you have it. Now you could add some column headers and make this a little bit more glamorous. If you do, feel free to pull the code from GitHub and make a pull request with what you've changed so you can share it with other people who might be interested in doing such things. If you like this video, please subscribe, send me your ideas and suggestions for new ways to use Google Apps Script to improve education. Talk to you soon.